The forest whispered warnings, though we didn't listen. It had been Morgan's idea, a long weekend off-grid, far from phone signals, email pings, and the relentless grind of city life. Just the four of us, Morgan, Anna, James, and me, huddled around a campfire, hiking by day and sleeping under a tapestry of stars. Morgan swore he'd found the perfect spot, a remote lake untouched by crowds, pristine and serene. "We'll have the place to ourselves," he'd said, grinning over the edge of his map. "No one ever goes out there." That should have been the first red flag. The hike-in was brutal, the trail fading into the wilderness until we were bushwhacking through undergrowth and climbing over fallen trees. But when we arrived, the lake was everything Morgan promised. A glassy surface stretched wide and dark, framed by towering pines and cliffs that curved like protective arms around the water. There were no signs of other people, no footprints in the sand, no charred fire pits, no trash. Just silence. It felt like we'd stumbled into another world. We set up camp on a soft patch of grass near the waterline. The air smelled of pine and earth, with a faint metallic tang carried on the breeze. Anna dipped her toes into the lake and declared it freezing but gorgeous. James, ever the daredevil, stripped down to his boxers and plunged in without hesitation. "It's perfect," he shouted, treading water. His voice echoed strangely, bouncing off the cliffs in distorted waves. Morgan joined him next, laughing as he cannonballed into the deep. Only Anna and I stayed dry. She was sketching the lake in her notebook, and I was content to watch the sun sink behind the trees, painting the water in fiery streaks of orange and gold. That night, we built a fire and traded ghost stories. The kind you tell while glancing nervously over your shoulder, half hoping for the thrill of something moving in the shadows. But nothing came. The forest remained unervingly still, no rustling branches or distant cries of owls. Just the occasional lap of water against the shore. Eventually, the fire burned low, and one by one, we retreated to our tents. Sleep came easily, but it didn't last. I woke in the early hours, the moon a pale sliver above the lake. Something was wrong. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and there was a faint sound, like whispering, carried on the breeze. I unzipped the tent and peered out. The lake was glowing. Faint streaks of light pulsed beneath the surface, shifting and writhing like luminous veins. I stared, hypnotized, until a splash shattered the stillness. "Morgan?" I whispered, stepping closer to the shore. The glow intensified as I neared the water. It wasn't the friendly, phosphorescent shimmer of algae, it was unnatural, almost malevolent. "Morgan!" I called louder, panic creeping into my voice. No answer. Behind me, Anna and James stirred, groggy and confused. "What's going on?" Anna asked, rubbing her eyes. "Morgan's gone," I said, pointing to the lake. James cursed and grabbed a flashlight, but the beam only highlighted the water's eeriness. It was too dark to see anything below the surface, but the glow persisted, flickering like something alive. "Maybe he went for a swim," James offered, though his tone lacked conviction. I shook my head. He wouldn't. Not without telling us. We searched the shoreline, calling his name until our voices grew hoarse. Anna cried softly, clutching her sketchbook like a lifeline. Eventually, exhaustion forced us back to the campsite. "We'll look again at first light," James said, though none of us believed Morgan would simply walk back to camp. I lay awake in my tent, heart pounding, the whispering sound growing louder. It wasn't the wind, I could hear voices, low and indistinct, like they were calling from the lake. And then, just before dawn, I heard it, a wet, sloshing sound, followed by heavy breathing. Something, or someone, was outside my tent. "James?" I called, voice trembling. The breathing stopped. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent, shining the beam into the darkness. The lake was still glowing, but now there were ripples, as if something had disturbed the water. Something big. "Morgan?" I whispered. But the only response was the silence of the forest, thick and suffocating. In the dim light of morning, we found his boots by the shore, neatly placed side by side. But Morgan was gone. The sun rose, but it brought no comfort. The lake was eerily calm again, its dark surface reflecting the trees like polished obsidian. The glow from the night was gone, as if it had never been. Morgan's boots remained by the shoreline, their laces neatly tied. "He didn't just vanish," Anna said, her voice thin and brittle. She clutched her sketchbook tightly, the pencil in her hand shaking. James paced near the water, his face pale. "If he's lost in the woods, we need to find him now." He turned to me. "He can't have gone far, right? We'd have heard him if he was in trouble." But I couldn't shake the memory of that strange glow, the whispering sounds that had seeped into the silence. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. "Split up," James said, already grabbing his pack. "We'll cover more ground that way." "No," I said quickly. "We shouldn't separate." Anna nodded in agreement. "We don't know what's out there." "Exactly," James shot back, frustration bubbling in his voice. "Which is why we need to hurry. If Morgan's hurt." Anna cut him off, her voice rising. "You think he just wandered off? He wouldn't leave his boots." "This isn't normal, James." Silence fell, the tension between us thick and oppressive. In the end, we decided to stick together, moving in a tight group as we searched the forest surrounding the lake. The woods were dense, the towering pines blocking most of the sunlight. The ground was uneven, covered in moss and tangled roots that threatened to trip us at every step. We called Morgan's name until our throats ached, but there was no response, just the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional distant snap of a branch. After an hour, we circled back toward the lake, our frustration mounting. James kicked at a fallen log, swearing under his breath. "This is useless," he shouted. "If he's not in the woods, then where is he?" Anna interrupted, her voice trembling. The words hung in the air, unanswered. As we approached the campsite, something caught my eye, a strange mark in the sand near the water. I crouched down, brushing aside debris to reveal a series of grooves, long and parallel, carved into the ground as if something had been dragged. "Over here," I called. James and Anna hurried over, their eyes widening as they took in the marks. They led directly to the lake, vanishing beneath the dark water. What is that?" Anna whispered. "Maybe it's from an animal," James said, though he didn't sound convinced. I reached down and touched the grooves. The edges were smooth, unnatural, as if whatever made them hadn't clawed the ground but sliced through it. "We need to leave," Anna said suddenly, her voice urgent. James frowned. "What? We can't just abandon Morgan." Anna pointed to the lake, her eyes wide with fear. "This place isn't right. You felt it last night, didn't you? The glow, the whispers. Something's wrong here. I don't think we're safe." Her words sent a shiver down my spine because she was right. The lake wasn't just a place, it felt alive, aware, and hostile. But leaving wasn't an easy decision. Morgan was our friend, and the thought of abandoning him. "Let's give it one more day," James said, though his confidence wavered. "We'll search again in the morning, and if we don't find him, we'll head back to the trailhead and call for help." Anna hesitated but eventually nodded. We spent the rest of the day combing the area, but it was like Morgan had been erased. By nightfall, we were exhausted and no closer to answers. That night, we didn't bother with ghost stories. We sat in silence, the fire crackling between us, each of us lost in our thoughts. I kept glancing at the lake, half expecting to see that unnatural glow again. But the water remained dark, impenetrable, and unnervingly still. "I'll take first watch," James said, his voice gruff. We agreed to take shifts, though none of us expected to sleep much. I retreated to my tent, lying on my back and staring at the fabric above me, every sound amplified in the quiet. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke to the sound of Anna screaming. I scrambled out of my tent, heart racing. James was already up, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Anna," he shouted. She was standing by the water's edge, pointing at something just beneath the surface. Her face was pale, her breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. "Look," she cried. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. A shape was floating just below the surface, a pale, human shape. "Morgan!" James shouted, sprinting toward the water. "Wait!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. But he wrenched free and dove in, his flashlight cutting through the murky depths. The beam illuminated the figure for a brief moment, and my blood turned cold. It wasn't Morgan. The thing in the water was twisted and wrong, its limbs too long, its face a distorted mockery of human features. Its mouth was open, filled with needle-like teeth, and its eyes glowed with that same unnatural light I'd seen the night before. James froze, his body rigid as the thing surged toward him. "Get out!" I screamed. But it was too late. The water erupted as the creature lunged, dragging James under. The ripple spread outward, the only sign of his struggle a single burst of bubbles before the lake returned to its eerie calm. Anna and I stood frozen, staring at the dark water. Then, slowly, the glow returned, pulsating beneath the surface like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. "We have to go," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. But deep down, I knew the truth. The lake wasn't going to let us leave. We sat frozen, staring at the still surface of the lake, the glow beneath it fading until the water was nothing but black glass once more. James was gone. One moment, he had been there, shouting Morgan's name, and the next. "I told you," Anna whispered, her voice quivering. "I told you this place isn't normal." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, the weight of dread pressing down on my chest. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to flee into the forest and put as much distance as possible between us and the lake. But where would we go? The trail we'd followed had been barely marked, and without James, our compass, and Morgan's map. "We're trapped," Anna said, as if reading my mind. She was staring out at the water, her hands trembling. "It won't let us leave. It's watching us." The words sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that there was a rational explanation for everything, but the sight of James being pulled under replayed in my mind. That thing, it wasn't human. "What do we do?" I finally croaked, my voice barely audible. Anna looked at me, her face pale and streaked with tears. "We survive." The next morning, we packed our things with shaking hands, moving as fast as we could. Neither of us dared to approach the lake, even to refill our water bottles. "We'll follow the sun," I said, trying to sound confident. "If we keep heading east, we'll hit the trail eventually." Anna nodded, though her eyes kept flicking to the lake, as if expecting something to emerge from its depths. We started walking, our boots crunching through undergrowth, the towering pines casting long shadows across our path. The forest was deathly quiet, the usual sounds of birds and insects conspicuously absent. Every so often, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the water following us. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky. We trudged on, the weight of our packs and the lack of sleep slowing us down. My mouth was dry, and my legs felt like lead. "Do you hear that?" Anna whispered suddenly, stopping in her tracks. I strained my ears, but all I heard was the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. "It's the lake," she said, her voice trembling. "It's calling us." I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, but then I heard it too, a faint, low hum, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't coming from the forest. It was coming from behind us. "It's in your head," I said, grabbing her arm. "Ignore it." Anna hesitated, her eyes wide and fearful, but she nodded. We started walking faster, the oppressive feeling of being watched growing with every step. By midday, we reached a clearing, and my heart sank. The lake was in front of us. "No," Anna whispered, shaking her head. "We've been walking away from it." How is it here?" The water was calm, the surface reflecting the sky like a dark mirror. But as we stared, ripples began to form, radiating outward from the center. "It's toying with us," I said, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. "We can't escape it." Anna dropped her pack, her breathing shallow. "What does it want? Why is it doing this?" I didn't have an answer, but deep down, I knew the lake wasn't just a place. It was alive, intelligent, and cruel. "We can't just stay here," I said. "We'll circle back." Maybe we took a wrong turn. A splash interrupted me, loud and jarring. We both froze, staring at the water. A figure was emerging from the lake, its movements slow and deliberate. "Morgan?" Anna whispered, her voice filled with fragile hope. But as the figure stepped onto the shore, we saw it wasn't Morgan. It wore his face, his clothes, but its eyes were glowing with the same unnatural light that had filled the lake. "Anna," I said, pulling her back. The thing that looked like Morgan tilted its head, its mouth curling into a twisted smile. Water dripped from its body, pooling around its bare feet. "Don't be afraid," it said, its voice wrong, like two voices speaking in unison. "You belong to the lake now." The thing lunged, faster than anything human should move. I yanked Anna backward, and we ran, the sound of its wet, heavy footsteps chasing us through the forest. "Don't look back," I shouted, my chest burning as I pushed myself to keep going. Anna stumbled, and I grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. The thing's voice echoed through the trees, chilling and distorted. "You can't run forever," it called. "The lake is part of you now." We didn't stop until we were sure we'd lost it. Collapsing against a tree, Anna clutched her knees, gasping for air. "It's not just the lake," she said, her voice breaking. "It's everything around it. It's everywhere." I didn't want to believe her, but the way the forest seemed to shift, the way the trees seemed closer together than they had been before, it felt like the lake's reach extended far beyond the water. "We need to end this," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant. "How?" Anna asked, tears streaming down her face. "How do you fight something like that?" I didn't have an answer. As the sun set, we found ourselves back at the lake. There was no use pretending anymore, it wasn't letting us leave. The water was glowing again, brighter than ever, and the whispers were louder, more distinct. They weren't just whispers anymore, they were voices, calling our names. Anna grabbed my arm. "If we don't go to it, it'll come for us. We can't keep running." The fear in her voice was mirrored in my own heart. The lake wanted us, and we were running out of choices. The lake's whispers rose with the night. The words were clearer now, though they came from no single direction. They seeped into the air, curling around us like smoke. "Come closer. It's easier if you don't fight." Anna and I stood at the edge of the water, staring into its depths. The glow beneath the surface pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat, illuminating shapes that twisted and writhed just out of focus. "I don't want to die here," Anna said softly, clutching my arm. Her fingers dug into my skin, trembling. "You're not going to," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Don't lie to me," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the water. We hadn't planned to come back, but the lake had drawn us here. Every step through the forest had been a sick joke, a loop that brought us to the same clearing, over and over again. The ground seemed to tilt subtly toward the water, like gravity itself was conspiring against us. "It's not just the lake," Anna said, echoing her words from earlier. "It's everything. The forest, the air, it's all alive. It's all part of it." I nodded silently, unable to argue. "What does it want?" she asked, her voice cracking. I didn't answer because I didn't know. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. Shapes began to emerge from the water, breaking the surface without rippling it, as if the lake wasn't water at all but something else entirely. At first, they looked human, figures with familiar faces, their features twisted and wrong. Morgan was among them, his glowing eyes fixed on us. So was James, though the thing wearing his form moved unnaturally, its joints bending in ways that made my stomach churn. Anna whimpered, stumbling backward. They're not real. They're not real, she muttered. Anna, I said, grabbing her shoulders. Look at me. She tore her gaze from the figures, her wide, tear-filled eyes locking onto mine. They're trying to break us, I said. Whatever this thing is, it feeds on fear. We can't give it what it wants. How? She whispered. How do we fight that? The figures advanced, stepping onto the shore. Their feet didn't sink into the sand, they moved as if floating, the glow in their eyes intensifying with every step. You can't resist, one of them said in a voice that sounded like Morgan's but wasn't. The lake is hungry. The lake takes what it's owed. My mind raced. There had to be a way out. People didn't just stumble upon places like this, something had brought us here, and something had kept us here. What if we give it what it wants? Anna said suddenly, her voice hollow. What are you talking about? She pointed to the lake, her hands shaking. It's not going to stop. We can't win. Maybe if one of us, her voice trailed off, but I understood what she meant. No, my voice was sharp, cutting through the whispers. We're not doing that. Her face crumpled, and she covered her mouth to stifle a sob. I can't do this anymore. You're not giving yourself to it, I said firmly. We'll find another way. The figures were close now, their glowing eyes boring into us. The whispers seemed to echo from inside my own head, making it hard to think. And then I noticed something. The lake's glow, it wasn't random. The light pulsed in a rhythm, a pattern. It was like a code, an invitation to look closer. Anna, I said, grabbing her hand. Do you see it? The light? She nodded, her tears streaking dirty lines down her face. It's trying to show us something, I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. We need to get closer. What? She asked, horrified. Trust me. We moved toward the water, the figures parting to let us pass. The glow beneath the surface intensified, bathing us in cold, blue light. The whispers grew into a roar as we stepped closer, the air vibrating with an unearthly energy. My skin prickled, and my vision blurred as the lake pulled us into its spell. Standing at the edge, I peered into the depths. The glowing shapes weren't random, they were forming something. A vast, circular structure lay beneath the water, its surface etched with patterns that seemed to shift and writhe. It's a gate, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. Anna's grip on my hand tightened. A gate to what? I don't know, I said. But it's not just a lake. It's... Before I could finish, the water erupted, and something vast and shadowy began to rise. The lake writhed as something ancient and monstrous broke through its surface. A shadowy form rose, taller than the pines surrounding the water. Its body wasn't solid but an amorphous mass of shifting darkness, shot through with veins of that unnatural, glowing light. The whispers intensified, no longer fragmented but unified, a chorus of voices, deep and resonant, echoing in my mind. You are nothing. You belong to us. Feed the gate. I staggered backward, dragging Anna with me. The creature loomed over the water, its presence suffocating, as if the air itself bowed under its weight. Tendrils of inky blackness extended from its body, slithering toward us, their movements deliberate and hungry. Run! I shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The figures on the shore, the grotesque imitations of Morgan, James, and countless others, were no longer just standing. They were advancing, forming a circle around us, cutting off any hope of escape. Their glowing eyes burned into us, and their voices joined the creatures, chanting in a language I didn't understand. Anna was frozen in place, her wide eyes fixed on the monstrosity. It's a god, she whispered, her voice trembling. Or something worse. I grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. Anna, focus. We're not dead yet. Her gaze snapped to mine, and for a moment, clarity returned to her expression. What do we do? I had no idea. The whispers clawed at my mind, filling me with dread and despair. I felt the pull of the lake, an insidious force urging me to give in, to walk into the water and let it consume me. My legs felt heavy, as if the ground itself was dragging me down. But then I remembered the patterns, the glowing shapes beneath the water, the gate. "It wants to open the gate," I said, my voice shaking. "This thing, it's trying to pull something through." Anna's eyes widened. "Something worse than it?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe that thing is the gate." She stared at me, fear etched into every line of her face. "How do we stop it?" I looked around desperately, my eyes landing on the fire pit we'd left smoldering earlier. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Fire," I said. "Maybe we can burn it. Drive it back." Anna nodded, her hands trembling as she reached for her pack, searching for the lighter we'd used the night before. I grabbed a branch from the pit, its tip still glowing faintly with embers, and held it to the lighter's flame. It caught quickly, a small but defiant spark in the suffocating darkness. The creature hesitated, its tendrils recoiling slightly from the light. The figures surrounding us faltered too, their movements jerky and disjointed. "It's afraid of fire," Anna said, a flicker of hope in her voice. Afraid might have been the wrong word, but the light clearly had an effect. I swung the burning branch toward the nearest figure, and it let out a guttural, inhuman scream, its form dissolving into a puddle of black sludge. The creature roared, a sound so deep it shook the ground beneath our feet. The tendrils lashed out, faster now, one of them slamming into the ground inches from where we stood. "Move!" I shouted, pulling Anna with me as we dodged another attack. We fought our way back toward the campsite, the burning branch our only weapon. The figures dissolved one by one as I swung it, their bodies melting like wax under the flame. But for every one we destroyed, two more seemed to rise from the lake. The whispers became screams, a cacophony of rage and hunger that drowned out my thoughts. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if the lake itself was pressing down on us. "We can't keep this up," Anna gasped, her face pale. "It's too strong." She was right. The creature wasn't just a physical threat, it was inside our minds, wearing us down with every passing second. And then, an idea struck me. "The gate," I said. "If it's trying to open the gate, maybe we can stop it." "How?" I thought of the patterns beneath the water, the glowing lines that seemed to pulse with life. "The fire, it disrupts whatever this thing is made of. If we can hit the gate directly, maybe we can destroy it." Anna hesitated, her eyes flicking to the monstrous figure towering over the lake. "And if we can't?" I didn't answer. We sprinted back to the shore, dodging tendrils and shoving past the figures that tried to block our path. The lake glowed brighter as we approached, the patterns beneath the surface swirling faster, more chaotic. I grabbed another branch, lighting it from the flames of the first, and handed it to Anna. "Ready?" I asked. "No," she said. But she stepped forward anyway. We plunged into the water, the cold biting into my skin like knives. The glow intensified around us, and the whispers became a deafening roar. The patterns beneath the surface twisted and writhed, pulling us toward the center of the lake. The creature howled, its tendrils thrashing wildly, trying to stop us. One of them wrapped around my leg, pulling me under. I kicked and thrashed, the burning branch still clutched in my hand. The flame hissed and sputtered as it touched the water, but it didn't go out. With a desperate swing, I brought it down on the tendril, and it recoiled with a shriek, releasing me. "Keep going!" I shouted to Anna, my lungs burning as I broke the surface. She was ahead of me, her own branch held high, the light cutting through the darkness like a beacon. We reached the center of the lake, where the glowing patterns were brightest. The water churned violently, as if the lake itself was fighting us. "Now!" I yelled. Anna and I plunged our burning branches into the water, aiming for the heart of the patterns. The flames erupted, brighter and hotter than seemed possible, and the creature let out a bone-rattling scream. The patterns shattered, the glowing lines splintering into 1,000 fragments. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep, resonant silence. The creature writhed, its form collapsing in on itself, and the lake began to drain, the water spiraling downward into a black void. Anna and I clawed our way back to the shore, collapsing on the wet sand as the last remnants of the lake vanished. The forest was silent, the air still and heavy with the scent of ash. "It's gone," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. The lake was gone, but the memory of it lingered, a dark stain that would never wash away. "We survived," I said, though the word felt hollow. The forest was unnervingly quiet as Anna and I trudged through the undergrowth, leaving the drained lake behind. My legs felt like lead, every step a struggle, but we didn't stop. We couldn't. The memory of the lake's whispers and the thing that had risen from its depths was too fresh, too vivid. "We'll find the trail," I said, though the words sounded hollow. My voice cracked, hoarse from screaming and exhaustion. Anna didn't respond. Her face was pale, her gaze distant. She clutched the burned remains of the branch she'd carried, the charred wood of faint comfort. The forest around us felt warped, as if the lake's influence hadn't disappeared with the water. The trees leaned too close, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes. The air was heavy, damp, and still, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. By the time we stumbled upon the trailhead, the sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. The sight of the familiar dirt path reminded me of how far we still had to go before reaching civilization. "We made it," I said, trying to muster a smile. Anna looked at me, her eyes hollow. "Did we?" The hike back was slow and grueling. Every sound, a snapping branch, the rustle of leaves, made us jump, our nerves stretched to the breaking point. "It's gone," I kept telling myself. "The lake is gone." But the words felt like a lie. Hours passed, the forest thinning as we neared the edge of the wilderness. When we finally saw the parking lot, my knees nearly buckled with relief. Our car was still there, dusty and untouched. Anna stopped, staring at it like it was a mirage. "Do you think we can just go back? Pretend this didn't happen?" I didn't have an answer. The drive back to town was silent. The world outside the car felt surreal, the familiar sights of gas stations and roadside diners clashing with the nightmare we just escaped. Anna sat with her knees drawn to her chest, staring out the window. "We should tell someone," she said finally. "About the lake." "Tell them what?" I asked. "That it's alive? That it eats people? No one's going to believe us." "They have to." "They won't," I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "They'll think we're crazy." She didn't respond. When we reached town, the first thing I did was check into a motel. The thought of being around people felt unbearable. I needed quiet, space to think, to process. Anna didn't argue. She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "Do you think it's really gone?" she asked after a long silence. I hesitated, the memory of the lake draining into that black void replaying in my mind. "I don't know." She looked at me, her expression haunted. "I can still hear it." I froze. "Hear what?" "The whispers." That night, I dreamt of the lake. I was standing on its shore, the water dark and still. The glowing patterns beneath the surface pulsed faintly, beckoning me closer. "You can't escape," the whispers said, wrapping around me like a vice. "You belong to us." I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The motel room was dark, the air heavy and oppressive. I turned to check on Anna, but her bed was empty. Panic surged through me. "Anna?" I found her standing by the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. "Anna," I said softly, approaching her. "What are you doing?" She didn't respond. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her hands clutching the edge of the sink so tightly her knuckles were white. "They're in my head," she whispered. "I can feel them." The next morning, Anna was quieter than ever. She avoided my gaze, her movements sluggish and distracted. "We need to get help," I said. "A doctor, someone who can." No, she interrupted. It's too late for that. What are you talking about? She finally looked at me, and my blood turned cold. Her eyes, they weren't glowing, but something was off. The color seemed too sharp, too bright, as if the lake had left a mark on her that I couldn't see. It's still with us, she said. We didn't stop it. We just delayed it. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the words caught in my throat. Over the next few days, things only got worse. Anna became more withdrawn, her behavior erratic. She muttered to herself, her sentences disjointed and filled with references to the lake. And the dreams, those godforsaken dreams, wouldn't stop. I woke one night to find her gone again, the motel door ajar. I ran outside, calling her name, but the parking lot was empty. Then I saw it, a faint, glowing light coming from the woods behind the motel. I followed it, my heart pounding, the whispers growing louder with every step. When I found her, she was standing in a clearing, staring at a puddle of water that shouldn't have been there. Anna, I said, my voice trembling. She turned to me, her eyes glowing faintly now. It's calling me, she said. I have to go back. No, I said, stepping toward her. You don't have to do this. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. It's already inside me. I'm part of it now. Before I could stop her, she stepped into the puddle. It shouldn't have been possible, it was barely an inch deep, but as soon as her foot touched the water, it pulled her under, swallowing her whole. I screamed, clawing at the ground where she had disappeared, but there was nothing left. The puddle was gone. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty clearing. When I finally stumbled back to the motel, I felt hollow, like a part of me had been ripped away. The whispers have quieted now, but I can still feel the lake. It's out there, waiting, watching. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can see Anna's face, glowing faintly in the darkness, calling me back.